Well, hello again, Year 8. We are expanding our horizons in the genetics topic. We're going to have a look at why our eyes are the colour that they are. We're going to have a look at how we get bits of information from our parents and how our body uses that information to give us a characteristic like eye colour. So I've kind of condensed a handful of bits of information. Feel free to go through this as quickly or as slowly as you would like to. We're going to have a look at some very difficult to spell words. Okay, heterozygous, homozygous. We're going to look at the word allele and what that means. And we're going to look at the idea that alleles can be dominant and recessive. We're going to look at something called a Punnett Square, and we're going to construct some Punnett Squares and then look at what on earth they mean. So here's hopefully something that you do know already. For every characteristic, we used eye colour as an example, but we could talk about a whole bunch of things, whether or not you can roll your tongue, whether or not you've got a particular hair colour, skin colour, whether or not you've got a particular genetic disease. For example, cystic fibrosis is a common one that we look at. Okay, but you've inherited those bits of information from your mum and from your dad. Now, we're going to look at this term allele here, which means different versions of the same gene. Okay, so for every gene, there are at least two alleles. Okay, so two different versions of that gene. One we're going to get from mum and one we're going to get from dad. They could be the same as each other, they could be different. Okay, and that's where we're going to use those terms homozygous and heterozygous. So hopefully you know that your chromosomes are matched up in pairs, and you get one of those chromosomes from each parent. In every single one of your cells, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes, with the exception of your sex cells, where that number is halved. Okay, so for example, you're going to get 23 chromosomes in dad's sperm, 23 chromosomes in mum's egg, and when they combine to form a fused zygote, a single cell, a fertilized egg, okay, you're going to have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now we talked about these different versions of the gene. Each different version is called an allele. Okay, and here this person has got two chromosomes, paired chromosomes. On one chromosome he's got the version of the gene that gives rise to brown eyes, and on one he's got the version or the allele that gives rise to blue eyes. Now, I told you we would look at some fancy words. The first one is homozygous. Homo meaning the same. Okay, so for example, we talk about homosexuals, people that like people who are the same gender as them. Okay, and in this case, we're talking about people that have got the same version of the gene, the same allele on both of their chromosomes. Okay, so here the guy on the left, okay, has got two brown alleles, okay, and he's got brown eyes. Okay, and here the woman on the right, she's got two blue alleles. Okay, they're the same as each other. Okay, they're both blue, and she has therefore got homozygous alleles for blue eyes. She has blue eyes. So by extension, heterozygous, hetero meaning different. Okay, as in heterosexuals, people who like people who are of the different gender to them. Okay, so here's what that looks like. They've got one allele for brown eyes, one allele for blue eyes. Okay, now whether or not we see a person with brown eyes or blue eyes will depend on which of these alleles is dominant and which one is recessive. So a genotype for someone with an allele for blue and an allele for brown will be written big B, little b. Now the reason we write them that way round, okay, is because the capital letter here represents a dominant allele. Okay, and in this case, the dominant allele is brown eyes. Okay, so brown eyes and blue eyes, when they're combined and when someone has one of each and is heterozygous, that person is going to have brown eyes because the brown allele kind of covers over the blue allele, so you just don't see it. Okay, now this is completely exactly the same concept for every single time that this happens in the human body. Okay, it's not just because the brown colour is darker than the blue colour. It's simply that in this case the brown allele supersedes the instructions to make the blue allele, so you don't see any evidence that this person would have one copy of the blue gene. You would only see the evidence that they've got at least one copy of the brown eye allele. Okay, so we've got an example here. Dad is on the left-hand side here. He's got brown eyes. He's homozygous for that brown eye. Okay, that means he's got two copies of the brown allele. Mum on the right is homozygous blue-eyed. She's got two copies of the blue eye allele. Okay, so here's Dad with his pair of brown alleles. Okay, and here's Mum with her pair of blue alleles. Look at that, genius. Right, so therefore, okay, what we're saying is that each of these brown eyes, okay, must be, apologies, each of these brown eyes, okay, each of these brown alleles exist in half of his sperm, okay. So Dad is big B, little b, apologies, Dad is big B, big B. Okay, that means that all of his sperm, okay, contain brown alleles. Okay, so 50% of his sperm, okay, are in this one here, okay, and they contain a brown allele. The other 50% also contain a brown allele. Now, Mum, her eggs are exactly the opposite. She's got one half of her eggs contain a small b. The other half of her eggs also contain a small b. Okay, and what that looks like when we draw something called a Punnett square, okay, is this. Okay, so Dad, who's on the left hand side here, okay, all of his offspring are going to be given one copy of that big B for brown eyes. Mum, however, is going to give every single one of her offspring this little b. Okay, so she can only give a little b to her children. Okay, and so she gives a little b to every single one of her children. Okay, which leads to this situation where every single one of the offspring here, okay, has the same genotype, the same combination of alleles. They all are big B, little b. Okay, which means that they've got that big B here that is dominant. And because they contain that dominant big B, that means that each one of the offspring are going to have brown eyes. Okay, so if you feel pretty confident, you can have a go at this example. Here we're looking at two heterozygous parents. That means they've got one copy of each allele. Okay, so exactly the same as before, okay, except for now, because they're heterozygous, that means they've got different alleles, okay, and we see that here, both people, both Dad and Mum, okay, both brown-eyed, okay, but both heterozygous with at least one copy of each gene. Okay, now in their gametes, okay, here's Dad. He's got a big B going into half of his sperm. Okay, so 50% of his sperm here contain the gene, the allele, the version of the gene for brown eyes. Okay, the other 50% contain a version of the gene for blue eyes. Now, if we look at mum, she is giving 50% of her offspring an egg, okay, with a big B in, okay, and she's giving 50% of her offspring an egg with a little b in. Now, if we just quickly erase those, okay, this leads to a Punnett square that looks like this, okay. If you fill this in, okay, you end up with something that looks like this, okay, and dad here, we're going to assume is on the left hand side, okay, his offspring, 50% of them, okay, are going to contain this big B here, okay, so you're seeing this row here, this big B is inherited from dad, this big B is inherited from dad. Okay, the other 50% of his offspring have got this little b here. Okay, now you'll see that here. That one's come from dad, and that one there's come from dad. Now it's quick worth noting. Okay, is that the first one of these that you can see here, okay, is always a dominant allele. Okay, so in both cases here, despite the fact that this one has come from mum, okay, I do apologise for using pink. That's awfully poor gender stereotypes used on my part here. Okay, but you can see here where each of these alleles has come from. Now the only rule when you're writing these down, you can write mum's alleles first or dad's alleles first, it really doesn't matter. The only rule, okay, is that the capital letters, the dominant letters, always get written first. Okay, so that's a lovely Punnett square there, showing you the breakdown of where mum and dad are giving alleles across to their children. So what does this mean in terms of eye colour? Okay, if I raise that quickly, okay, this guy here on the left hand side, okay, he would be brown eyed, okay. This guy would also be brown eyed because he's got at least one copy, okay, of that dominant gene there. As does this person here, okay, so they've got a brown eye. However, this person on the right hand side contains no brown alleles to mask the blue, and therefore that person, that 1 in 4 chance here, okay, is going to have blue eyes. Now, that's really important that we get that these aren't necessarily, okay, 4 children. Let's say these people have 100 children. Well, that simply means that 25 of those 100, okay, would be in this category here. Okay. Now, the middle two, okay, are the same. So if we're talking about those ones there, okay, we're saying, well, 50%, okay, of these parents' offspring, okay, are going to be in this middle category here. Okay, well, obviously only 25 are going to be blue-eyed. Now, what that means is, okay, because for most people, you're not going to know whether or not you're in this middle category or in this category. That means that 75% are going to have brown eyes, and they're probably not going to know if they are the 25% that are in this category or the 50% that are in this category. Okay, so if you've got brown eyes, you could well be in this group with the possibility of only ever passing on brown alleles, or you could be in this middle section here with the possibility that you pass on some blue alleles. Okay, both of our parents here were in this middle category, and it produced a situation where 1/4 of their children, okay, were born with blue eyes. Now these are statistics, so you could be one of 4 children who are in this situation where mum and dad both are big B, little b, and despite being one of 4 children, you might be in a family where no one has blue eyes, and that is very possible. Similarly, if these parents had 4 children, it is also possible that all of their children, okay, would have blue eyes. To give you an idea, it's the same as flipping a coin twice and getting heads both times. Okay, so if you are part of a family of 4, okay, whose parents might be in this category with big B, little b, okay, you could try it. What are the odds that you and your siblings would have blue eyes if your parents had these genes? So, here's the big test, okay? The allele for brown fur in mice is dominant over the allele for white fur. The genotype of a white mouse is always going to be WW, okay? Because we know that if they've got white fur, they don't have a copy of that brown gene. If you think you can, I'd like you to try and tell me how you could work out whether or not our brown mouse here on the right hand side has got big B, little w, or big B as its genes. Now it's quite rare that we use W's and B's. Okay, normally we would refer to it as big B, little b. Okay, but in this case we're going to use big B and W. Okay, so this brown mouse here has got an option for genotype. Okay, he could be big B, or he could be big B, little w. But the white mouse is only ever going to be little w. Okay, so there are 2 options for our brown mouse. We don't know what his genes are, but if he was big B, then he's only ever going to be able to pass on a big B to his offspring. So therefore all of his offspring are going to have brown skin or fur. However, in outcome 2, 50% of his offspring are going to inherit this white gene. Okay, which means that if that 50% are going to inherit it, then some of his offspring could be white. Okay, now I'm not going to go ahead and fill these out, but if you'd like to, you absolutely can. Give the video a quick pause, okay, and fill out these Punnett squares. Here's what they look like. Okay, now what does this mean for the offspring of these mice? Well, in outcome 1, all of the mice are going to have brown fur. They all have 1 copy of that big B allele. In outcome 2, however, 50% are going to have 1 copy of that brown allele, but the other 50% have inherited white allele from both parents. So, if any of the offspring from the cross between a brown mouse and a white mouse have white fur, then the brown parent must have been heterozygous. That's big B, little w. However, all of the offspring from the cross, okay, if all of them are brown, you're likely to believe that the genotype of the brown parent mouse was big B, Now, as we said before, you could get very, very unlucky, and if your mate had 100 babies, in theory it is possible for all of the babies to be brown, and yet the parent mouse be heterozygous. Okay, however, it's just very unlikely. You'd have the same odds of flipping a coin 100 times and getting heads every time. Okay, so what I'd like to do is have a quick pause, okay, of the video, see if you can link these up, okay, and we're going to go through them pretty quickly. So pause the video now. Okay, so an allele, okay, is one out of two or more versions of a gene. Okay, the next one's dominant. Well, you're going to see that even if there's only one copy present. Whereas with a recessive one, you're only going to see that if there's no dominant ones there at all. Okay, so you'd have to have two recessive genes in order for the allele to be expressed. Now, a heterozygous gene is one where the alleles are different, okay? And you can remember that because heterosexuals like people who are a different gender to them, whereas homozygous, okay, means the same, okay? And so those two there go. Now I'm going to just leave you to think about these, okay? But these are four kind of harder questions. Now your teacher's going to be uploading a submission page exactly the same as before. They're going to be two different worksheets depending on what set you're in, okay, to have a go at. If you get stuck, by all means, comment back to your teacher and maybe they can help you with your worksheet. But give it the best go that you can, and we'll upload the answers for you to check against later. Have fun, happy isolating, stay safe.